Hello. Hey everyone. It's glad to see you all here. Please make sure to write some nice comments, write where you're from. Let's get to know each other. This is my second stream. I'm a learning in progress. I guess it's public stream person, YouTube guy thing. You name it, what you wanted. Please tell me how the sound is because on the previous video, someone really recommended me to adjust some of the mic settings. Now we have a little bit different sound than maybe you used to in my videos. Hi. Yeah. Hi, Oskil from Denmark. Hi, hi. Yes, tell me about the sound settings and tell me how it is. Perfect. Mic to be closer. I'm not sure if I can get the mic closer. I can try to get a little bit of a boost to mic and you tell me if this helps or not. So I'm gonna do a bit of a boost and it might get a little bit louder. So tell me if this is better or not. If not, then I'm just gonna go back. Right, so today's stream sounds good. Okay, I don't eat the mic. It's literally too far away from me to eat. So we are doing this second stream, and the first one we tried to do a little bit of with the topic because I just didn't know how many people would come. And this time I'm quite certain a lot more people are here. I see more than 100. This is 5 times more than it was last time. I hope you guys really appreciate that. I appreciate it. It's about 100 people more than I was expecting. I'm going to continue saying this all the time. And I hope you guys watched yesterday Starsky stream. I think it was his first live stream where he did an interview style. And he did it with Anna from Ukraine, or did he do one before with Dennis? Either it was the second one he did with Dennis. Your sound is good. Perfect. That's great. Yeah, I think it was either the first or the second, and it was super interesting. If you haven't watched this, I definitely go to the Operator Starsky channel. And remember, on my page, if you remember in some of the videos, I told you, like, can you drop in some of the names and so on? And on my page, if you see here at the top, when you scroll a bit down, there's a good channels related to war in Ukraine. And as you guys recommend me more channels, I'm going to add them here. So if you're looking for some kind of channels that are related to Ukraine and also interesting to find, you can drop by my page and I'm going to try to add more channels as they appear and someone recommends them to me. And yeah, definitely go to the Operator Starkey channel. He's the number 2 here. And it's really amazing. It was a very wholesome interview they had with Anna from Ukraine. And I would wish that at some point I will be able to be big enough. Right now, as you remember, our last post, we were discussing how I became from a no-name streamer to a completely irrelevant, no-name YouTuber to a completely irrelevant one. And now we're slowly but surely growing to become, what was it? Someone referenced like a minor blip. So we're edging towards the minor blip. And as a minor blip, one of the things that you can do is you can start inviting some other people. I guess it's a thing that you can do. Yeah, Anders Bach Nielsen. Yeah, I've actually thought about just inviting him or actually coming to him live because as far as I'm aware, he's somewhere in the Copenhagen area that is not too far from me. So I might try to write him up and maybe we can do a together stream because I think his strategic analysis is spot on. He's doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do, but he definitely has more insights. If I'm just a guy on YouTube, then I think he has just a little bit more experience. And he also, I think, had a channel before the war started, so he didn't start with the occasional noticed. No. Yeah, maybe. But yes, really nice to have you here. And thank you so much. Please write. Yeah, Florida, I see. Super nice. Like Switzerland. Wow. Super, super, super nice, guys. Philippines. I actually know that people like, yeah, from Netherlands, someone is also watching me. All are welcome. All are welcome. Arizona. I big love to you guys. UK. Super, super nice to see you all here. Argentina. I actually was surprised. A lot of people watch me from South America. And this was interesting because I always thought that like for South America, the whole conflict in Ukraine is one of the furthest away, like how it matters. Like if we consider Africa, then for Africa, one might say, yes, but Africa is dependent on the food exports that Ukraine and Russia are having. So the conflict between these two food producing nations are really influencing the life inside of African continent. So for them, it really mattered. Yeah, Vlad Vexler is super good. Vlad Vexler is super good. He actually was the first to acknowledge that I tagged him in some of my video links and so on when I did the How to Follow Ukraine video. He actually came in, and I really thought about inviting Vlad, but like I'm just a guy. I'm a simple guy that mostly deals with data. I really am really good with the numbers and Excel spreadsheets and so on. And he's a very philosophical kind of guy, so he goes deep into the thoughts, into that area of expertise that is very far from mine. And I was just afraid that the questions that I can give him would be so stupid, essentially, that it would not matter. But definitely, I would recommend Vlad Vexler's channel for sure. He's a very good philosopher in a sense of how he understands Russia, because whenever he's describing Russians and the Russian mentality, I'm just going to adjust the camera just a bit, and how the war is perceived inside of that country, and it's very much spot on. It's what I see in reality. Yeah, there are forces. There are forces on the east side of the Oskil River. Kupiansk has been proven to be liberated a couple of days ago, and they are now moving south from Kupiansk. So it's normal. They are indeed advancing. So the Russians cannot put defensive positions along the Oskil River. So it's a very good strategic position for the Ukrainians. And I'm really thinking that they're really waiting for the Liman to break. Because once the Liman breaks, they have basically a couple of avenues of advancement towards both Svatove and towards Kremnina, which is the second line of defense that Russians are trying to build up. They are not even yet built, but they're really trying to build up. And I gotta say, the Liman defense for the Russians is going quite well. Very often I say that Russia is shit, and sneak peek, I'm gonna make a video about why Russian army is shit. I got some research done in that area. And one of the videos that I'm going to do, a special one, will be describing all of the issues that are coming with the Russian army. So look out for that. Yekaterina Shulman, no, I disagree. I could disagree completely with Yekaterina Shulman. She's very popular, but when you start analyzing her points that she stands, it's pretty shit. She's like a Captain Obvious for the fancy crowd. She is not stating anything that is, how do you say, she's over-analyzing the obvious things, and she's presenting it in a way that this is, and I'm not going to talk a lot about Yekaterina Shulman, because she is a very, very kind of Russia-centric spokesperson, you can say. I really don't like a lot of the liberal opposition in Russia, and I've been quite open about it. I think they're very useless. I think they don't want to radicalize themselves. A lot of them are still, right now, there is some kind of local elections coming up in Russia, and they're still discussing about the fact that we need to participate in local elections. You need to vote for someone else rather than the ruling party. Vote for, it's complete dog shit. It's like they did this for 20 over something years and nothing worked, and now they're just continuing their track, and they just never learn from their mistakes. They just have this weird phenomena that they're in a military fascist state that is running an open active war, committing war crimes with a bloody dictator at the helm, and they are just continuing doing this weird dances with signs saying no to war on the streets where one or two people coming out. Because if you didn't know, in Russia it's prohibited to have a protest that is unsanctioned when it's more than one person. And well, technically one person is also being taken care of. So it's a complete dog shit. The Russian opposition is dog shit. If the Russia breaks, it's not going to be because of the liberal opposition that Russia has. It's because there is going to be a conflict between the ultra radicals that are right now criticizing Putin, and where a lot of the Russian population are actually listening to. So that's the war criminal Igor Girkin, the one that actually started this whole conflict in 2014. He's was the basically the jolt that kicked off the Russian invasion into Ukraine proper. And yeah, so it's the Navalny is like, the problem with Navalny and liberal opposition, and hear me out. So the problem with them is they don't see Russia's imperialism as a problem. What they see is they say, well, it's just the wrong kind of imperialism. We need still Russia to be this imperial colonizing power, but we just want it to be a different one. That's the problem with Navalny. That is literally in one sentence. Oh, welcome to the brother in arms. White Lightning 777. Welcome, welcome. Yes, so the problem is that they are literally just wanting another brand of the Russian Empire. That's it. That's the only difference. They just say it's not. It's just a little bit. We need a different type of colors. Right now, it's just a little bit too fascist. We just need a little bit different. Navalny is a nationalist, and the Russian liberal opposition. There was a quote about Navalny and how he was talking about Crimea, that it doesn't belong to Ukraine and Ukraine needs to deal with this. And there was one famous saying, but he addressed that point multiple times. And liberal opposition has said, like, yes, the point that he said that the Crimea is not a sandwich, so it just can't be returned to Ukraine. But there has been multiple interviews where Navalny was saying about the fact that Crimea should not belong to Ukraine. And one might say, yes, but it's better than Putin. Yes. Like, by this point, anything is better than Putin. And even if Navalny comes, I would kind of grinding my teeth, but accept it, because democracy is still, in my book, is the value that I would like us to strive for, and Russia also. But to be honest, it would still be a big question mark if the countries surrounding Russia would trust once someone like Navalny is at the helm. Shulman is the member of Presidential Council for Civil Society and Human Rights in Russia. How do you think that has worked? The fact that she's not dead in prison. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty. Like the question, it's Russia is complicated. It's obviously like any political system, especially when we get to the political system that is based on authorities, right? You know maybe the top layer, right? We know Putin. We know Putin's the close circle. But then the power basically spreads the same way around the different authorities down the line. So Shulman might be just protected under some authority. Maybe she's a relative, or he's like someone else's good friend is good friends with Shulman. So, you know, those deep roots we just don't see of the authoritarian system. So that's why, like, the point of authoritarian system is not that it's doesn't allow sometimes weird voices. It's just there is a different system at work. It's a corrupt system that is not working by the rule of law. It's working by the rule of power and strength that is belonging to a specific clan of people or a specific person in charge. What do you have on your back wall hanging? You mean the Ukrainian flag? Oh my God, that one. That's the Ukrainian flag. I'm pretty sure that was somewhat obvious. What it was. If you didn't know, yeah, obviously a big question. I don't know why everyone was so surprised. So as you know, it's not misspoke. I explained that I was not a Ukrainian and I was not living. Oh, $25. Thank you, super chat. There are a few brave Russians that have thrown down their guns and switched to fight for Ukraine. There's that National Republican Army that blew up Dugina, but they might also easily be insane. I've talked about the Republican Army and the Russian opposition. That is what the Russian opposition right now should be. It's the not the opposition, it's the resistance. You know, the inside resistance. It's the partisan activity. That is what Russian opposition should be right now, and not participating in the elections that are run by this authoritarian regime. So with the Republican Army, I don't know how strong they are. I have a lot of questions around it, because while there was event with Dugina, we didn't really hear a lot. And I'm actually subscribed to their Telegram channel that they're advertised. And to be honest, there is not many activities that they are taking account of directly. It's sometimes they're just saying, "Oh, there was a train that went off the sleds." Well, I guess now it's us, and they never stated actively. So there was. I'm afraid that Dugina is going to be the only loud case that we'll have, and that's it. Key Hansen, thank you so much for the donation, 20. If you have any question, please ask that. I will read it through. It would be nice for you to get something out of the donation. And remember, guys, any kind of donations, money, what I get, I will send to Ukrainian army as much as I can. And I'm actually thinking that maybe a first tranche, just because it's an active warfare and Ukraine can use the money, maybe I'll even send more of it and not really rest in pieces. Yeah, but it's not clear with what the Republican army wants. But this is what the Russian opposition should do. And I'm still very sad about how unwilling to take action Russian society is, even the opposition. So they are like, it's okay for us to protest Putin, but we're just not ready to take any kind of action. Well, it's time to take action. Ukrainians are taking action. Ukrainians are dying because they don't clean up their shit, if you can understand what I mean. Okay, but that's enough about the Russian opposition. Who do you want to be the president of Russia if we're from the... Who do we want to be president of Russia if we were from the US? Joe Biden? I don't know. No, I don't know. President of Russia. I don't think Russia should have a president. I think Russia should become a parliamentary democracy, like any proper state. I think that the national republic should have the vote of autonomy or secession. I don't think Russia should be in a state that it's currently now, because the fact that they have so much land is getting to their heads, and they're thinking of themselves more than they are. What do you think Victory Day next May in 23 is going to look like in Russia? Well, that's a good question, Ronald. And thanks for the donation. Because we know that the First Tongue's army stocks that they used for a parade in Russia and so on has been pulled out. So there's not going to be a lot of equipment left. Like, Russia is scraping the barrel right now. When I was telling you about the fact that Russia is running on fumes, I was not joking. A lot of the somewhat modern equipment that was shown on the parades and everywhere has been scraped out. And right now it's not completely clear what kind of equipment they would say on a Russian military parade. But I'm not sure there will be a military parade by this point, because right now the dialogue inside of the Russian society is changing, and mostly it's changing not towards the liberal side, as I said. It's changing to be more aggressive, to be more, how do you say, an aggressive side, like this radicalized side. So it's definitely gonna be dependent if Putin will stay in power, because that is a big question. One of the things that I wanted to discuss today, and I actually might jump into it, but let's hold this. Like, I'm going to talk in a second about this topic, but let me just answer some of the first questions you guys write here. You mentioned Lend-Lease will not bring significant increase of weapons to Ukraine. Why do you think US wants to bleed Russia? It's another reason. Yeah, I think Joe Biden's US strategy here, I kind of read into it. I've read what the analysts are saying when I was doing the video for Lend-Lease. And I think the biggest thing here is to break the Russia from the inside. You know, to yes, give enough weapons for Ukraine to win, but also build the situation so the Russia cannot recover. So the situation inside Russia basically boils down. So there is no easy way out for Putin. Like, essentially, if the invasion just fails militarily, then he blames the military, and then he rebuilds it in his own image. I think there is a deeper like actual plan here on how to break Russian systems, how to make sure that different clans are at each other's throat, how to bleed Russia dry for money. Because remember, right now, Russian economy is bleeding money. It's really bad. If you remember, I told you about two numbers. One is 1,000 troops per day that needs to be killed or wounded for Ukraine to start actually defeating Russian military. And second was getting the oil prices of Brent under $60. Well, oil prices are still fluctuating and now kind of slowing down. But all in all, we saw the reports that analysts were making for the Russian economic system, and Russian economics are bleeding. they are sustaining it only because they had not money saved for it. Obviously, US and European countries were able to freeze half of their reserves, but it was still 300 billion US dollars. It is a lot. By this point, Russia is probably about a third down of their war chest. So they need another 2/3 to start completely bleeding dry. And from there, at that moment, the whole situation, Russia is going to implode. There was a video about from CGP Grey. You can Google it. It was called "Rules for Rulers," and CGP Grey explained quite well when it comes to wealth distribution in authoritarian regimes, about the fact that the money is what needs to be distributed if an authoritarian leader is going to keep having an authority in power. So that's a big deal for Russians to still have the money in the war chest. And that's a problem because right now it doesn't seem that there's a lot of money going to be left in a couple of years. And I think that's the plan of US, to completely bleed Russia dry, demand nukes to sign peace, and essentially denuclearize Russia by the end. Lift sanctions basically for the ask for the nukes. But I think that's the ultimate goal. I think the nukes are literally the only question that is in everyone's head, both in Europe, except Europe, we know that it's taking the unprovoking dictator's position, whereas US seemingly just have a plan on how to deal with the country and try to bleed them from the nukes. I think they might have had this plan prepared some time ago. So at least that's my guess. This is all speculation. So I'm a guy on YouTube. Take it at the face value. What I'm not a face value, but take it with a grain of salt. What I'm saying here. Yes. Some suggest US won't announce tanks or jets. Training programs have been complete. Have you had an idea? You said delaying or this training? No, I don't think there's training. I think the planes are definitely in. The problem with the planes is not really the pilots. The Ukrainian pilots can learn how to fly the planes. Someone was estimating that it would be maybe like within maybe 6 to 9 months, they can prepare solid combat pilots, maybe faster if those are experienced pilots. However, the problem with it is that there's a lot of technical staff that needs to be trained. So how to take care of it. There was discussions about Polish staff or having Polish air bases, but it's a very slippery road to take to have planes fly from Poland into Ukraine. But I think this is what is going to happen in the end. And we know that new fiscal year has budgeted $100 million for training of Ukrainian pilots in the US planes. So we'll see. I think it will happen, but it's a long term. Hi, Malit, 10 pounds, thanks. Do you agree if Russian people rise and successfully eject Putler, then China and other authoritarian countries may be next to rise and get rid of Xi communist regime? Glory Ukraine. Glory indeed, my friend. I don't think Russian people will rise. I think we as a Westerners, we give too much credit to Russian people. But Russian people have not shown to have a deliberate desire to essentially get rid of the Putin. While there is a lot of discussion about the fact that the Russian military is underperforming, not a lot of the blame is on Putin. Some of it is. That's very important. That some of the blame inside of the Russia is already going on Putin. I think the Xi's communist regime. It's interesting question, but I'm not that deep into the communist China talks and understanding how communist China works, like I'm into Russia, obviously, because I read Russian, I can listen to Russian speak, I can speak Russian myself, ask questions if needed, and I know deeply and profoundly how Russians think and what their daily activities are. I don't have the same kind of knowledge about how China operates and what the Chinese people think. I can ask some of my Chinese friends, but that's going to be essentially like an anecdote. Could Putin now pull out and say that Ukraine is now denazified and the special military operation was a success? Thanks, Ronald. I think yes. I mean, Russian people are ready to buy anything. The problem is the longer he waits, the harder it's going to be. One of the things that's happening right now is Russia is getting slapped. we started they started getting the slap when the Kyiv wasn't captured. It was like a light touch. Then they had to pull out from Kyiv. That was a little bit of a like, woof, why did this happen? Then Ukrainians sank the Moskva, and that was the first one that hurt. So at that moment, Russians were like, kind of, ouch. Why is this happening? What's happening? Then there was the pullout of Snake Island, which is like in a strategic sense completely well, not completely, but it's rather useless compared to what's happening. But Ukrainians did make a big deal out of it, which was great. And because they made a big deal out of it, it was another slap for the Russians. They actually reported on it a lot. So that was really great. And now we also know the Kharkiv offensive, and this one really hurt. Like at this point, the Russians are actually already holding their cheek, and kind of, like some brain activity, like rusted cogs, like or what was it with the Homer Simpson meme with where like this monkey with the, oh my god, I forgot even how they're called in English, but you know what I'm talking about. So the rusted monkey is kind of slowly starting to work it out that something might be off. Like there's been a series of slaps to me in the face. Why is this happening? They still haven't linked it to the Putin and his aggressive war, but every single next one, it's going to be more and more noticeable. They're paying attention now. And that's the problem for Putin. If he just says, then they're just going to say, thank you so much for pulling it out, but why my first face still hurts from someone slapping me? Hey, Patrick Andrews, 1999. Ooh, I love that. It's a proper economic move. How has the opinion of Americans changed in the minds of Ukrainians this year? It seems there are many different feelings about the West. I don't think there is many different feelings. I think the war showed where there was, hopes and dreams, and where was the reality. Because for a lot of Ukrainians, they had a very romanticized picture of what the EU is, and EU was always considered to be, like closer ally. US, obviously, also, like they have this love. And especially it was noticeable for me when I was going to Ukrainian cities a lot, when you say that, like, yes, I'm coming from any Western country. It was very friendly and was always very cozy. They say, thank you so much for the support. And it's like, we're really looking forward and so on. Some of them were still skeptical about if they're going to join EU, but they still want to join EU. But all in all, I think that's been quite nice for Ukrainians, because I think the biggest questions that Ukrainians are having now, and this is important because Ukrainians, they very strongly distinguish between leader of a country and a government and nation, because they saw that pretty much all of the nations and people of the Western world, we are very supportive of Ukrainians. We help support the refugees. We have support for people. We donate donations the first couple of months. Oh my God, I got so many thanks. Like, and they said, like, can you give like thanks to anyone whoever's doing it? Like this, thank you. This helps everyone so much, because almost all Ukrainians either had relatives receive donations and helps like from the West, or they know someone that is kind of close to that went over the border and they've been received as refugees, and the stories are great. The people are very, very helpful. There is, of course, one or two cases, like percentage-wise, that didn't have the best experience. We also know that there was some human trafficking ongoing on the Polish border right as the war started. But in the majority of it, there is a very warm and nice attitude towards people in the West. The governments is a different thing. A lot of the reluctance is not being seen as a friendly attitude. And while like someone like US is easier for Ukrainians to understand, because US is doing a lot, but it's not doing, like how much Ukrainians want. But they get it. And then there is like someone like Germany, which is they promise a lot, and then they find all these weird reasons that that sound more like an excuse. And it's not about that they just couldn't wait, like we need to wait and so on. No, it's like the Germany's government promised something, like for example 100 martyrs. They said we're going to promise it, then Rheinmetall said they're ready, just take it, and then German government, yes, maybe not, and then they crossed it out of the purchase list for Ukrainians. a lot of the shady attitudes from the German government side. That's hence why the critique towards it. Whereas they see a lot of the states that were towards the east, like Czechia, Slovakia, a lot of the Bulgaria, a lot of the people in the Balkans, also Baltics, Denmark, Sweden, Finland. A lot of those countries have shown to be very reliable partners for Ukraine. When they cannot promise something, they don't. When they want to deliver something, they mostly deliver. And that's the biggest thing, I think, that then when Ukrainians, they get all these promises, we're going to support you with everything you can, we're going to have this change of turn of the tables forever now, and we're going to change, and then they say send 5,000 helmets. It just, doesn't match. And I think that's the problem that Ukraine has. Sorry for the long rant. Spiff Clips, greetings from Belgium. Greetings. Keep up the excellent work, Jonas, and putting things in perspective. It's top notch. Thanks for what you're doing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Spiff Clips. I'm not some kind of major analyst. I basically just, for who I am as a person, I can process a lot of data and understand what it means. And most of my information come from analysts and sources that I know and that have been proven to be trustworthy. That's why I'm quite sure when I'm saying some certain things. But if you've been following me when the situation was developing here during the offensive in Kharkiv, then most of the things we said was right. But then at after a week, when the Ukrainians were starting to break, then there was a lot of misinformation in the cloud. And at that moment, it was very hard even for me to get from the trusted, verified sources. So that's just the nature of how I do things. I'm not stating I'm some kind of major grand analyst. I'm just a guy on YouTube. So hope you get it. I hope you are okay with that. David Smith, do you know anything about how the Ukrainian and Russian armies compare in terms of winter clothing and supplies? Russian army is pretty fucked. That's how that's how it is. Russian army is fucked. Ukrainian, we need always to understand that Ukrainians are supplied by the West. I think if there is going to be a strong campaign and Ukraine will demand winter clothing, I think there's plenty of companies. One of the things that I want to do is I want to approach, there's a company in Denmark that's called Bestseller. And I want to see if I can get Bestseller. And I know Bestseller a lot because I was living for a while in Aarhus. It's the second largest city in Denmark. And Bestseller was a company in which one of my friends actually took part in, and maybe he still have some connections. I'm not sure if they will, but I'll see what I can do. And if there will be a need for some warm clothing, I'm pretty sure the West will respond, because we generally on the West answer very favorably when it's not an arms supply. In our peaceful mind, we're still, kind of understandable when someone is asking for something that is not weapons. And then usually we deliver, because people in the West are amazing, especially, I don't know. You watch me from everywhere. So I cannot just explain that it's only the West. That would be a lie. I think just generally people that follow this war and can distinguish when a military superpower invades other country, commits war crimes, rapes and kills and pillages, is not a very nice thing to do. That doesn't really take too much. But apparently when you read something like Twitter, you start questioning that a little bit. All right. Yes. What's the most plausible scenario for fighting in Kherson city videos? Is their leading theory? Ebrim asked. Ebrim Q. I think it was staged. Either staged, or there was a partisan activity, or there was some infighting, but it's definitely not regular Ukrainian forces. That would be kind of a little bit silly. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing there? Maybe some kind of group that got in. But this is war. There are things happening. Like just today, I saw video clips of Ukrainians running in panic and some of the troops being essentially, run over by the Ukrainian military. I'm not sure if you saw the video, but it's war. There's a lot of things that are happening that we would rather not see. And that's the first thing that I blame Russia for, that the situation even happened at all. All right. I hope I answered most of the super chats, and we're gonna come back to the questions, guys. Don't worry. I hope you save your questions. I will come back to it. But I first need to, before this stream started, I've actually asked some of our members and Patreons to ask their questions about what they want to hear on this QA session and how they would like me to respond. And they wrote some kind of interesting questions that I think we can dedicate some time to. So MMC is asking, I should have put some water for me, but MMC asks, railroads are important logistical Russian asset. Railroads are the lifeblood of Russian military weapons manufacturing and combat supplies. I understand that railroads are Russian Federation railroads are struggling with breakdowns and lack of parts. I do not think that this is the case. As far as I did my research on the Russian railroads, they are old, they haven't been modernized, and a lot of the money for modernization has been stolen. However, the stocks and supplies and spare parts produced in the Soviets are still there. There is plenty of spare parts. We can consider if they are repairing all the railroads fast enough, but we need to understand that in a Russian scale, all these problems that are happening in the railroads, like when one of the lines, like some of the trains just go over the line, it's a very anecdotal evidence of what's actually happening. There are so many different, like railroad network in Russia is very, very thick, especially when it comes to the European part. So I think whatever we're seeing when the Russian railroads, they're not struggling. It's just the local events that are preventing a very specific case for maybe couple of hours or days. So, and as much as I would want to say that yes, Russia is struggling, I do not think that railroads are a problem in Russia, at least for the needs of this war, because I see a lot more railroads working. This is just us noticing. This, like our psychology is working. We're just noticing things that like, oh, this is nice to know, but we don't notice the 100 videos that are before of Russian railroads working properly. In Belarus, railroads workers were sabotaging equipment, which was actually quite on a big scale compared to Russia. Will Ukraine be modifying the tracks to European gauge anytime soon? So that's a question that been struggled a lot with the Baltics. And firstly, obviously, the Ukrainians have already removed parts of railroads that were going towards Belarus and parts of the railroads that were going towards Russia in their controlled areas after Kyiv offensive. And they are not going to be continuing that connection until the war is over, that's for sure. Do you know Russian movie Durak? Yeah, I think it was like in English it was The Idiot. I will talk about this, Fox. Give me a second. The railroads are pretty much not going to be a thing in between Russia and the other part in Ukraine for the coming future once Ukraine regains control over its borders. As for turning the tracks to the European gauge, we need to understand that what goes into railroads and if someone doesn't know, the Russian and Soviet style railroads, they're a little bit wider than the European ones. So European trains cannot just quickly go to the same railroads. This is something Poland was struggling a lot, and this is what is Baltics struggling a lot right now. Like Baltics joined in 2004 into European Union, and only now 2022 they are building some kind of a railroad connection to the continental Europe. The problem with the rails are not only the railroad width itself, but also what kind of locomotives can run these rails. The problem with Russian rails is the way that they are powered and the way that energy and electricity is delivered is not the same as in a European standard. So obviously the trains that are powered by diesel or diesel or coal or gas, I'm not sure. I'm not a train expert. So whatever, like, steam trains, whatever, anything. Those trains maybe can run, but most of the trains are running on electricity, and that would be a more efficient way. And to get those correct tracks, which, for example, European locomotives can just drive through, it's not that easy. And I'm not sure that even Poland has the connection to Ukraine tracks switched to the European standards yet, or is this a possibility? It will be a big undertaking, and it's going to be a big project. And I think one of the important here things to underscore is Ukraine is huge. We always discuss Ukraine, but only when you visit it for the first time and you try to drive through it, you just realize just how huge it is. When you go from Kiev to Kharkiv, you know, the big two cities, and it's like pretty much like an overnight. It's amazingly huge. And maybe obviously for people from US doesn't sound like a lot, but for me coming from a small European country, that's quite a task. Do you know the Russian movie Durak? Yes, I do know that movie. And I guys, I recommend you. I think I saw it on YouTube. I think it was called Idiot. Let me actually Google this. Let me switch to, oh, no, not this one, this one. Let me switch. Russian movie Idiot. No. Or is it Fool, maybe? Yes, perfect. Guys, if you want to understand Russians, does it have English subtitles? Oh, no, come back. So does it have... Yes, so English subtitles. Guys, find this Russian movie drama 2018, The Fool. Watch this movie if you want to understand how Russia works, how Russian corruption is working, and so on. In this movie, this is about a person that is like a buildings engineer, and he discovers that one of the buildings that he's inspecting is faulty because there was an accident, and in that accident he then essentially uncovers the whole corrupt system that Russia is operating on. It's a really good representation of what it is, and I think it's one of the most underrated movies about the Russian society, period. It's like a lot of the people were talking about Leviathan as a movie, and I'm not sure if you watched that one, but you can also watch that one. But Leviathan, to be honest, doesn't hold a candle to how accurate this movie is, because this movie shows the low-level, like city-scale authoritarian corruption that is permeating throughout Russia, and explains a lot of the questions, like when you just put it parallels to like the Russian army. Do you think Ukraine will get the ATACMS from US to attack Kerch Bridge? I think, yeah, at some point. At some point when US will consider it to be a necessity. But I'm not sure that they will need to, because if Ukrainian attack, for example, on Mariupol will succeed, then they can use the G30 missiles, I believe they were called, the regular that are using right now, HIMARS systems, to be more to strike Kerch Bridge. The difference also with ATACMS is that ATACMS missiles are easier to shut down because they are larger targets, they are more noticeable, and they are a bit slower than the G30 missiles. So it's a question if using ATACMS would be more or less useful for Ukrainians. But I think at some point US will give them. The full Russian movie, yeah. There's a movie from 1991 that translates Oxygen Starvation in English, which is about the hazing practices in the Red Army. Yeah. I mean, Red Army and Russian Army is pretty much the same shit, except Russian Army is the Red Army on drugs. That is even worse. I mean, at least the Russian army that Putin is having right now. There was like a sliver of it, which was modernized and was supposed to be like more of a professional, some of it mostly in VDV, but they were also the first to go into Ukraine, and they were pretty much decimated. And we all know now the tale of the first first Guards Tanks Battalion, I think, or Army or Guard or something. I don't understand. Like this is military stuff. Perun did a great video on it just a couple of days ago. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a big long video that Perun is always nice, good to make, and he discusses just how significant the destruction of the first Guards Tank Brigade, I think, or an army or whatever battalion is. Why is it significant for the Russians? For Russians to lose? Do you know if Russian soldiers have started surrendering in Kherson? I have not heard anything about them surrendering. There was a lot of talk, but I always thought that it was just psyops. I never considered that it was maybe like something real, and I always thought that until I see them surrendering, I don't believe that they are. All right, Flash73 is asking. It's again from the Patreon, the supporters. Remember, whatever I get from Patreon and supporters, I will donate to the Ukrainian military. And I still, important note, I always say it, but there has not been still a single payment that I got from YouTube at all. So if you're wondering like why I never post like how am I supporting Ukrainian military, is because apparently I still haven't fully like been well, I think I've been now processed. It's just there was never a payment done yet to me. I hope it's going to happen next month, and then next month I will send out money and try to get support and maybe post some pictures what we actually bought and what we did. Flash 73. Hi, I work in the subway Stockholm. Nice. In the event of war emergency, we are to use subway stations and shelters. Kiev did use theirs this way and still does. Is there a way to examine how effective this measure was and how the inhabitants felt about these and using subway trains in the underground stations as sleeping places? All right, so it's very easy to answer. It's you just need to basically visit Kiev once. The point is that after, for example, I've never been to Stockholm, but I've been to UK. And in UK, the tube is actually quite shallow compared to what you have in Ukraine. In Ukraine, going down to some of the stations can take you literally minutes to just drive on the escalator. Like it will take you like maybe 10 minutes or something. I don't know, like maybe 5, 7. Like for example, Arsenalna, I believe, is the deepest station in the world that is under the ground. It is super deep. So in Kiev, metro is very, very deep. And actually in Kharkiv as well. I was driving Kharkiv metro and it's also quite deep. So it's not the same as like some of the stations in UK, in London, where are, well, not open air, but, well, I know some of them are, but there are also stations that are underground, but they're usually not that deep underground. And as far as I've heard, New York Metro is also not that deep underground. In Ukraine, it is really deep. So there is like hundreds of meters of ground between metro station and people and surface. As for how the people felt, I have some friends that were in Kiev during that period, and I actually took my time to write to them and ask what they think. And basically, the answer was it was uncomfortable. Like we were obviously on the sleeping stations. Not all of us were used to sleep on the floor, but thankfully someone brought cardboards, and some of the people that were more useful they helped to set up and the place to sleep. Firstly, most of the time they were not spending the whole days in the metro stations, but sometimes they were, and because people felt unsafe in their apartments and unsafe being outside. When there was this uncertainty, the girl that explains to me, she's saying that she felt that it's not safe whenever it was, even there if there was no air siren. At first there was this dread because there was a new thing, like, you know, no one is prepared to go to war and be under missile attacks. And once she got underground, she just felt a little bit safer. Later on, as they got used to explosions and missiles flying in, when some rationale came into understanding and air sirens became more common, at that moment they start feeling a little bit more secure to do some things on their own. So it's a tough thing to do, but it's also a thing that people can get, well, not used to, but at least they know that this is for a time being. And thankfully it mostly was, but there's still obviously shelling, especially of Kharkiv, which is right. One of the biggest districts in Kharkiv that's being shelled is Saltivka. And Saltivka, I've been there quite sometimes. Saltivka is a completely, how do you say, like a district where people just come to sleep, and there's a big market there, and it's ludicrous for me even to see that this area of the city is being shelled, because there's like there is not much, even, like an office building that could be vacated, that could be empty. It's literally just people sleeping, and not people sleeping, but the buildings that people live in, like multi-story buildings that people live in after multi-story building where people live in, and so on. There is not even like a place that can be like said, oh, this was some kind of specific object for military or something. So it was the saddest thing for me. That was, well, I mean, not the saddest, but this whole war is the saddest thing. Yes. Grizi Vasyuk is asking, internal Russian politics are starting to come to a boil. How does this impact what we are seeing from the Russian presence in Ukraine presently, politically, militarily, and in the general in Russian population? I would not say that Russian politics are coming to a boil. I think that's a little bit premature. We're giving a little bit too much credit, and we are giving a lot of wishful thinkings to what's happening inside Russia. We think that Russian population is more active because we want to think, right? Because how can you just watch your government do something vile like this war, have all these war crimes? For us, it's never understandable. But in Russia, not so much. People in Russia still support what Putin is doing. They a little bit don't support, but they're still behind Putin. And while there is some talks, I would not bet that much on the Russian society. As for militarily, well, that's a disaster. Russia is running out of any kind of... I'm going to do the separate video by Russian army shit. But the Russian military right now is heading towards disaster completely. It's not even close. They are running on old equipment while they're having a lot of stuff still. They're having a lot of stuff, more stuff than Ukrainians. It is not even close about the quality of the stuff. And as Ukraine will get more and more support from the Western allies, Russians are going to have it harder and harder. But I think they're going to break before, just because they're going to run out of any kind of capable troops, and most of their troops will be either very tired or battle incapable or something. And then when a UK trained military comes from abroad on the new trucks, on the new APCs, on the new tanks, hopefully, that's when the Russians are going to start breaking. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's going to happen. In general, political population, Russian population, I would not bet on it. Like, the best example is the Russian opposition, and I already told you that Russian opposition is pretty shit. As for Russian, the biggest problem they're facing right now is the actually external politics. In the area around the Middle Asia, like Middle Asian problem around Russia, like south of Middle Russia, if you think about where it is located, Russia was essentially like a dominant power. The Middle Asia was very far from any kind of Western influence, and to be honest, there wasn't a lot of interest. And China was still kind of looking how to get it. And Russia was basically a dominant player in the area because a lot of those countries were former Soviet countries. And Russia has ridden a lot on this Soviet legacy train, a lot. However, with the recent Shanghai Cooperation Conference or something like this, I forgot how it was called, it was shown that Russia is losing any kind of legacy it has. China is taking over. The countries don't care anymore about what Russia says or does as a security provider, like a mediator, like the conflict between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, I believe, and as well as conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia is stopping to be a player in the external politics. The legacy of Russia is failing. Russia's military, it's not only me, a guy on YouTube, sees that the Russian military is running on fumes. It's all the neighbors. I am sure that once Russia loses this, then this whole Middle Asia is going to start being a very hot zone. Maybe not all of it is in conflict, but I think China will get significantly stronger from all of this. A lot of people are expecting that China will just take over some of the Russian provinces. Maybe, definitely in an influence-wise. but China will definitely come as a strong local power. And we also know that Turkey is looking that way. So I'm believing that Turkey will spread its influence towards the like Caucasus region, whereas China will take Middle Asia. So yeah, first guards tanks army. Thank you so much for fixing me. Yes, so Russia is losing all the clout. The biggest thing that this war has shown is that Russia is not the Soviet Union. It has shown that whatever Putin has built is not as quick, as strong as Soviet Union, and it's not as stable as Soviet Union, and it doesn't represent what Soviet Union stood for. Whatever Russian creation is, it was a miscalculation for the ages, what Putin did to Russia. Right now, Russia is becoming a local power with no military. And that is pretty much a death sentence. I know that probably it will not get invaded due to the nukes, but for all the sakes and purposes, every other projection of power is gone. Yeah, Perun's making. I mean, like the amounts of stuff captured in the Kharkiv offensive. I'm just there's some Twitter accounts like reports on equipment. They are just like you can scroll pages and pages of captured equipment. It is so much of it. It's crazy. All right, so again, Grice Vasyuk is asking, we've seen Ukraine push the big Kherson counteroffensive and then strike the vulnerable Kharkiv occupied territories in their liberation. Where would you think the Russians are being led by the nose to set up another surprise thrust and grind down more of their troops, surrender or leave Ukraine? I think the way that the Kharkiv succeeded was a big surprise for the Russians and for the Ukrainians as well. I think no one was expecting such a big surprise, but it was great that it was. And I have thought that it's not clear that there will be like some kind of leading by the nose. We definitely know that some of the, like I've made a map that was with the strategic targets. It's definitely going to be around these targets. I think that the biggest priority that Ukraine wants to strike is Melitopol in the south. But Melitopol is hard to reach, mostly because there was a lot of how do you say, a lot of power concentrated in that area. But we also know that a lot of that power has been now struck down. That is mostly known because I putting 2 and 2 together right now in front of you, is that there has been people that were used to be collaborators around the area of Melitopol, Tokmak, and they've actually been reported to reach out to Ukrainian forces and actually provide like ways like how can we stop cooperating with the Russians, how we can get forgiveness for us and so on. That was reported, and it was reported as a systematic thing. So I'm very hopeful that a lot of the Russian targets will be marked in the coming days, and we will see a lot of the big explosions, and Ukraine can weaken this grouping on the south side even more. But all in all, I think Liman right now is the most perspective one, because it's literally one city that is holding the whole advance. And if Ukraine can take over the northern Luhansk part of the area, that would be very devastating for a lot of the Russian forces, and especially a lot of the separatist forces, because that opens the gates towards taking Luhansk. And I think if Luhansk, the city, falls, oof, that would be a bitch slap again in the face that would really hurt for a lot of the Russians. So I don't know, it's hard to predict, especially when we know how good the first execution and OPSEC was for Ukrainians. Whatever the armed forces of Ukraine are doing, have trust, believe in armed forces of Ukraine. Ukraine will win this for sure. Valery Zaluzhny has shown himself being a genius strategist at this point. And while maybe it's obviously not completely clean and shiny as we would expect it, like it's from some computer games, it is still war and there are mistakes everywhere. But I have the trust that it's going to be great. Harry Ivasyuk is asking, hi, has anything particular surprised you in the past weeks of this war? You mean besides the Kharkiv offensive? I'm thinking besides the Kharkiv offensive, because I'm pretty sure that surprised everyone. But I think the biggest thing that surprised me, I think the fact that Ukraine was able to push towards the Severodonetsk and towards Bilohorivka, you know, the infamous place where Russians lost a lot. I think what was surprising for me is just how much Russians don't have as a second line of defense. And I'm again something I'm going to talk about why Russian army is shit when I started doing a little bit more research about why this Kharkiv offensive failed, is just how much the Russian corruption is permeating even in war. I was not expecting that. I was expecting that, you know, like after they failed so hard that they're gonna start learning. Like, to be honest, after Kiev offensive, I thought, okay, well, now we're gonna go back to the positional warfare, and Russians are gonna start learning, and they're gonna, you know, fix their shit together and so on. And I've heard analysts that are saying, no, like you cannot fix. Those are systematic problems. These are the problems that, like, to be prevented, it should have been a completely different system. And if there would be a different system, then this war would never happen. So people link those kind of together. But to be honest, by being like this, not a military expert, I just was not seeing it. I thought it's like, obviously they're gonna learn. Obviously they're gonna fix their fucking command or whatever. And they didn't. It's all still completely permeates on lies. It permeates on people misreporting. They are still reporting to their generals and superiors what the generals and superiors wants to hear rather than what's the situation actually on the ground. Like that, the fact that the towns are not really being controlled by the military, but they're controlled by the police that doesn't even have working armor. That they're just having, like, you know, some tanks of which two don't ride and the other don't and the third one doesn't shoot. That was the surprising part, because I thought that by this point they would, you know, learn. They didn't. Yes. Next question. Rob Taylor. Big thanks to him. He's one of the biggest supporters on Patreon, and so super love, massive. I will make sure that the money will go to support Ukraine. He's saying, I have read up on Ukrainian modern history a bit, but some of your thoughts on what has gone on since, well, the Maidan revolution and maybe even especially Minsk deals that fell through. At the start of the war, well, actually not the start of the war, but like a couple of days before the war, like 21st, 22nd, I actually wanted to make a video about what's the situation in Ukraine, like how did Ukraine got to this position when it's in a tense situation with the Russians. But then the war started, like I got completely shocked by the situation and everything, and I never made this video, and that was unfortunate because I could have referenced it right now. But the point is, we need to understand that after the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine was not perceiving itself as a nation. It was split between a lot of the legacies, because a lot of the Ukrainian people that were living in Ukraine and were natively Ukrainian were sharing the land with a lot of the people that came to live to Ukraine during the Soviet occupation of Ukraine. And there was a lot of the moving parts. Then there was this question around, well, is East speaking Russian, like is mostly Russian speaking East, is also Ukrainian, or is it not? Can Ukraine also be considered the Ukrainian if you speak? There's something that in Ukraine that's called surzik, which is like a mix between the Ukrainian and Russian. It's a slang. It's not really slang. It's like a mix. Like, let's put it this way. And a lot of the people speak surzik in the eastern part, especially. And there was a lot of debate, and a lot, especially Orange Revolution, was very divisive. Like if you look at how the voting were, there was a big divide between like the Russian-speaking part and the Ukrainian-speaking part of the country. But I think the Maidan Revolution was very telling, because Maidan Revolution was the revolution where they rose up against the corruption, because a lot of that arguments that if we are Russian speaking, we are different from Ukrainians, and Ukrainian speaking are different from the Russians. A lot of that was mostly due to oligarchs pooling their side, like the Ukrainian history and oligarchs is a video on its own, and it requires a lot, because Russian oligarchs and Ukrainian oligarchs are very different, because Russian oligarchs have been subjugated by Putin, whereas Ukrainian oligarchs didn't, and they mostly have this clan formation running until the pretty much the 2022 hot phase. But after the Maidan revolution happened, that was one of the first birth of the nation that I've ever seen in my actual life. It reminded a lot of the things that happened around the Baltics when they were subjugated, when they had something they called like civil movements, if you know the Baltic Way, where they protested as a separate countries. And Ukraine didn't have an officially recognized country before they were occupied by the Russian Federation. They were declaring that they are Ukrainian National Republic, I believe it was called, but they never had an officially recognized country. However, after the Soviet Union, there was a lot of this back and forth between different clans of the people, and there was a lot of play on the fact that yes, we're Ukrainians, but you know, like we're the Russian Ukrainians, so we're the different kinds. But when Russia occupied Crimea, that is when the things really kicked into high gear. That was when a lot of the Ukrainian mythos has been born around the defiance to the Russians, around the fact that if we're brothers, like, because Russia has really peddled this narrative that they were brotherly nations, which is completely false. Like if you watch some of the videos how Russians were showing Ukrainians off, it was always as silly people, you know, that are like super little Russians, as they would call them. It's very, very bad. And the Ukrainians, after Maidan and after this whole turbulence with Russia, with Girkin actually starting the war, that was when the nation got born, when the nation really was born. And especially when the mythos around the fighters of Ukraine, like cyborgs, they have the people who defended Donetsk airport. It's a very major site. If you don't know this, I'm not sure if Winter on Fire, I think Winter on Fire was mostly around Maidan. But all in all, it became this Ukraine as a nation fighting the oppression that came from the Russia. I think during the Maidan, the link, and after the Maidan, the link between Russia subjugating and throttling money to support powers that want Ukraine and Ukrainian nation gone became obvious for Ukrainians. And that's why when the 2022 invasion came in, the Russians that thought that this eastern side Ukraine that was supposedly Russian speaking, no one greeted them with flowers or cakes or bread. It was all saying like, get out. This is Ukrainian land. Get out. Yes, we speak Russian. Yes. And a lot of the mainly Russian speakers, like Zelensky was originally a mainly Russian speaker. So, and those were shown to be one of the biggest fighters against the Russian occupiers, mostly because they had this association with Russia. But after 2014, it was a big kick in the gut for a lot of Ukrainians, especially when we're talking about two very important events. One was the battle for Ilovaisk, and the other one was the battle for Debaltseve. Especially, I believe, Debaltseve. Because in Debaltseve, Ukrainian troops, that was actually when the Minsk agreement first was signed. And Ukrainian troops were supposedly given a green corridor for exit, and then Russians fired on the green corridor. And then they were saying, okay, sign these Minsk agreements, or we kill all the troops that are going through the green corridor. That was the situation, and that's how Minsk agreements were signed. That's why I don't think that referring to Minsk agreements and thinking that they were signed in good faith is really a good thing, and especially because they were not fulfilled by the Russian side, and they were never, kind of moved past the signing phase. So Minsk agreements is just a propaganda piece that Russians are using, and any kind of reference to them is completely silly. And Europe just acted as a Russian puppet at that moment. They still wanted to gas, and they still didn't want to accept the fact that Putin is a bloody dictator. And they had we just need to, understand Russia. Well, fuck it. Where's the understanding of Ukraine? That politics that Europe did that back then is what led to this war happening, because Europe did not say, Russia, get out of Crimea, get out of this of these lands that you are in. We played this weird game. Oh yes, it's a civil war between Ukrainians and Ukrainians. Oh, and Crimea, well, it just happens that the Russians got in. Well, who know that it was happened? That kind of thinking is what got us to this war. That kind of thinking is responsible for people now being found with their hands tied behind their backs and shot in the head. It's on the politicians that said, well, we should negotiate how to freeze this conflict. Assholes. Alan Mason, thank you so much for the donation. If you have any questions, please feel to ask. I hope I'll find it. How long will it take to rebuild Ukraine, and who is going to pay for it? I think it's going to be a common effort. I think rebuilding, you can be surprised just how fast Ukraine can rebuild. I think it's going to come as a lot of grants from EU. I think mostly it's going to be EU, especially because Ukraine is a EU member state, and as a future prospect for EU, Ukraine will be really good, because EU doesn't have a lot of like gas and resources, whereas Ukraine does. Some people are referring to saying that Russia invaded Ukraine because of resources. That is complete garbage. Like, it might be like on the number 10 or 15 on Putin's reasons to invade Ukraine. It's a complete nonsense. Russia invaded EU. Like, we watched first half last time about what Putin said about the invasion into Ukraine, and there was not even anything mentioned about this. And obviously someone says, yes, but it's implied and so on. And denying resources obviously is a nice thing, but that's not definite. That definitely is not a primary reason. Russia is fighting Ukraine on this philosophical pseudo meta historical perspective of who is the actual how do you say, actual descendant of the Kievan Rus. And it's obviously not Russia. If you read up a little bit about Russian history, you realize that they have very little to do with Kievan Rus. Very little. Also, Meg Carpentry Love Dog says the whole household watches. that is a big thanks. The big thanks for me. Yes. Okay. So that's the Minsk agreements and so on. And Ukraine actually, like, talking about the Minsk agreements, Ukrainians actually gotten amendments in the constitution about recognizing the special state of Donbass. So they did some of the Minsk agreements, but Russia never got the forces out. So during all of these years, Russia was just supplying more and more weapons to the people inside, to the terrorist fighters inside of these occupied regions. And I mean, referring this to any kind of civil war is a complete Russian propaganda. It has nothing to do with reality. Completely off. Like, there's not even close. Max Carpentry Love Dogs, thank you for 50. I think it's Canadian dollars. Is it Canadian dollars? I hope it's Canadian dollars. It's Canadian. Well, I mean the first part of the sentence. Our Canadian households totally appreciate all you do, and you are watched all the time. Thank you so much. Big love. Maps, frank perspective, historical information, and filling in the blanks as news comes in rapidly. Thanks. This is super, super important for me. I mean, my biggest problem is that I always, like, at some point ago, a little bit of personal history. Let's dive in. So I was born in the Soviet Union. Still, so I still have somewhere my birth certificate that has the the hammer and sickle and everything. It was a green little book, so which is pretty cool. Very, very big rarity for me right now to have. But I was born in the Soviet Union, and because I was growing up in the 90s, and a lot of the time, like, Russian was still a language for me to know, and I knew a lot of the Russians and so on, and their mentality was so different from whatever I understood. And that was for me very interesting, because I had some hopes, because I also, during my childhood, I watched a lot of cartoons from like shows like Cartoon Network, like Hanna-Barbera's cartoons, especially like Flintstones and so on. And I know that those are like the cartoons from like what, the 60s, 70s. But we need to understand that in the post-Soviet states, they came in a lot later. And like first Tom and Jerry I saw, I think it was like 1993 or 1994. And for me, it was magical. Like, what is this? Because before it was only Soviet cartoons, which are, well, like, let's just say not as good. Uh, and it's been interesting. And just watching how the Russian society evolved. Like, oh, I never was political in my aspect, so I didn't do creatively. But then there was border tensions between Russia and some of the Baltic countries, and I was like, oh, well, why is Russia still being aggressive? And then the first Chechen war, and then the second Chechen war, then the Kursk, and Russia. I just saw how the Russian society sinks deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole. And when I first visited Ukraine in 2013, it was just a trip to Crimea, ironically, or it was 2012, I think. And that's been like my first introduction to Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian people. And when I saw and talked to Ukrainians, I always thought like, wow. And because it was Crimea, a lot of the people spoke Russian to me as well. And it was very interesting to meet them because they were essentially the Russians that I would always Russians want to be, because they were kind people with no kind of like this gripe about the Soviet past. They didn't reference it that much, and they were looking into the future and super, super cool and cozy. And that's what I felt basically in love with Ukraine a lot. So when 2014 Maidan revolution came in, and a lot of the Russian news were just saying, well, Maidan was essentially staged by the US government and it was an illegal overthrow, and actually all Ukrainians are Nazis. I was like, wait, what? Huh? That doesn't make any sense. What? Like, it's the people that I just talked about like a couple of years ago. Like, all of them were like very nice because we did like a big trip with our car throughout Ukraine, and basically we stopped in each city, talked with some of the locals. So like we got our first influx of that, and it was pretty cool. I recommend you doing this once the war is over, because Ukraine is definitely a country worth visiting. And so I after that, as soon as I had the chance, as soon as I had my vacation, I got a ticket and I flew to Kiev, and I was at the Maidan Square not long after the all the things was done. There was still war happening on the east side in Donbass, around Luhansk and Donetsk, and it was around the time when there was shooting of Mariupol. There was this big event during the time where Mariupol got shelled with Grad missiles. Well, I guess that didn't age that well. And I talked with the people that were at the Maidan and tried to explain to me like, well, why are you Nazi? Why are you Nazi? Why are you suddenly don't like Russia? And they were like, this is all lies. Like come on. Like, especially the biggest argument the Russian has, like, you cannot speak Russian in Kiev because they're just gonna kill you on the spot or like beat you up. And obviously, because I was able to speak Russian, that never happened. And I was like, okay, someone is lying here, and it's definitely not these amazing people. And I was on that Maidan Square, and there was like these scorch marks all over the place where the tires were, where the barricades of tires and stones and some wood, they were just there and they were burned, and there was like these big scorch marks all along this. There's like in Kiev on this Maidan Square, there's like big how do you say, like a monument, and all around that monument was like scorched ground. It was, half of it was still gone because it was taken to make boulders to throw at the police force. That was very impressive. One of the most reviving moments in my life, when I understood that they are being preyed upon, this nation and these good people being preyed upon by the Russian propaganda. And then they took Crimea and obviously the Mariupol, and I was like, I know who is in the wrong here. And then the propaganda of the Russians became even worse and worse and worse. And I tried talking this about to my Western friends, but they were just like, yeah, no, it's gonna be okay. Russia is not gonna do anything. It's a conflict that's Ukraine. It's like, it's not the same because there's a lot of people that speak Russian. It's like, no. It's like the Ukrainians that speak Russian, they don't want to be part of Russia. They just still want to be part of Ukraine. Like, the Crimea referendum wasn't true. And it's like, yes, it wasn't true, but it's like, it was still unclear because we need to understand that for a lot of the us people in the West, like this doesn't sound really important, but it was very important for me, and I was very saddened by the fact that because Russia is influencing so much pressure and pressuring EU because of the gas and all the contracts that it's having, it was just unfair. And my sense of fairness was just like yelling and saying, this is not good. It shouldn't be done. And yeah, sorry for this long and winded story. I hope you more or less enjoyed it. Oh no. LVX Magics. Sorry. Yeah, I missed a little bit. Do you think this is the end of Putin's Russia and ending with a collapse? Also, do you expect any more surprises before the end of the year from RU UK offers? I think we can expect surprises from Ukraine. I am very much thinking that what ex-General Ben Hodges is saying for the Ukraine is going to be true. I think a couple of more big slaps to Russian forces is going to completely demoralize, because as I said before, the problems that Russian military is having is systematic. No amount of mobilization, no amount of getting new fresh meat into the grinder is going to save this position. It can prolong it. So the Russians are just going to die in droves, but nothing at this point can change the outcome. It's just how much it's going to last. And maybe it's not going to happen this year. Maybe there's going to be like a general mobilization that Russia will announce once they see that they don't have a lot of volunteers that want to fight. But it's not going to change the outcome. So I think we can expect another offensive, maybe Kharkiv-like. I'm expecting that either Luhansk region or Melitopol, like area around Melitopol, the south part, will collapse. Obviously, the Kherson like the Kherson northern part, I'm thinking that will collapse as well. Though there have been right now suggestions that they're trying to build some kind of bridges and like to get oil pumped essentially through the pipes underwater. So they're being creative on how to get supplies to the other side, but I still think it's not enough. And I believe that the Ukrainians will prevail. I hope that answers your questions. And sorry can I refund it? Can I refund it? Okay, I cannot refund it, but I'm sorry that I missed the first one. Level 70, do you think a negotiated peace with Russia is possible, or will they have to be completely humiliated and defeated? I mean, like you don't need to humiliate Russia. Putin already humiliated Russia. Like what humiliation are you talking about? Like Putin already showed everyone in the world that Russia is a joke. Russian military is a joke. The countries around Russia that used to look at it and said like, "Ooh, big threatening Russia. Let's better not provoke the bear." Now looking at it and saying, "Hey, China, save us! Come on!" It's like, so what kind of humiliation are you talking about? As for defeated, I mean, define defeated. Will Ukraine go to Moscow? No, but I don't think there is a reason to go to. Well, the negotiated peace is possible, but essentially the peace should go this way. Russia gets out of Ukraine, out of Crimea, out of Donbass. Then they sit down and negotiate peace talks on how they will pay reparations. And then they can start having an internal discussion who was to blame for this operation. That is the possible negotiated peace with Russia that I see. You mentioned to mention channels to add. Anna from Ukraine. Thank you. Yes, I should have added Anna from Ukraine. Again, I'm going to repeat. If you haven't seen Operator Starsky and Anna from Ukraine talk yesterday, it was super insightful talk. I recommend it so much if you have the chance. So those are the questions that I had from my patrons and supporters, and I think those were excellent. I think you guys still have some questions. I also have some topics prepared to talk about, but I think we're just going to dedicate this session to the QA. I believe you have a lot of really good questions and comments, and we can definitely jump off of those. So let's go. Yeah, Air Force and Navy. I mean, Navy is the funniest one. I think like of all of this, as much as sad as this, we can at least laugh about like just how shit Russian Navy is. That they are losing naval combat to a country with no navy. That takes skill. That takes skill. And stealing toilets, yeah. All right, let's see. Let's see if what happened in Kherson. I mean, in Kherson. You mean the shooting in Kherson? As I said, it's the probably Russians are fighting between each other, or there was like a small partisan group, something like this, but nothing that's going to change the end of the war. Oh, a good question about Belarus. So let's talk about what Belarus will do in this war. Well, after Kharkiv offensive, Belarusian forces that considered maybe should go in, they will not go. That's it. Like the Kharkiv offensive not only prevented the assault on Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, it completely prevented now attacks from Belarus. Belarus forces will not go in at all. Period. Belarus, like Lukashenko, is dependent on Putin. His regime is completely dependent on Putin because Belarusians, we saw the protest that Belarus had, and while I have things to say about Belarusian protests not radicalizing again. This is, I think, was a big mistake that they tried to do peaceful protests while their friends essentially being taken by police. It's just so silly. I never understand this. It's a weird like mentality that's also very close to Russians. So you protest the power, then the power, then the police takes your friends away. They take them to a prison. And then they beat and torture them in that prison. Like there's videos of people screaming inside the prison at night. And then people gather around this prison at night and they're asking everyone to please protest a little bit more quietly so they will not torture the prisoners that hard. I cannot understand this. Like for me, it's something like completely ununderstandable, right? I hope I would like, I'm not going to be saying that I'm the biggest like aggressive person here, but if my friend is being taken and beaten and tortured, I will get a Molotov cocktail or something like this because I just couldn't do it. Like that just sounds ridiculous for me. So sorry. I do understand that Belarusians are very nice and chill people, and a lot of the people I respect a lot, especially some of the Belarusian opposition. But I think they're still, again, I don't understand why they're not doing anything. They're really not taking any actions. And I mean, they were very, very amateurish in what they did. And again, I'm talking here like I'm some kind of expert. I'm not. I just explaining my emotions and how I feel about the situation. Yeah, Belarus invades. Well, Lukashenko is toast by this point, period. Because if the Putin's regime falls, Lukashenko is done. I think even if the Putin just goes away and it's going to be the new Russian government that will still support hardline towards Ukraine, I'm not sure that they will be able to negotiate with Lukashenko. I think Lukashenko's regime is going to be out. Moreover, I've told you about the fact that Russians are running low on budget. Remember, some of that budget is also being paid to Belarus. Like Belarus is literally holding on the Russian money. Yeah. I know that Russia stepped into Belarus, but I'm just saying that there was time when they had the window to essentially radicalize and, I don't know, break into the prison and release the people being tortured in that prison, rather than posting videos where you see people running around saying, oh, please, don't protest so loudly. What a joke. What do you think would trigger a withdrawal from Ukraine? Ukrainian armed forces. One curiosity, if Putin loses, what will happen to Transnistria? I think it will collapse. Transnistria is fully dependent on the Russian money. Would you consider adding Joe Blogs channel from the UK? He's great unless it's on news. I'll take a note. I need to watch him. I don't know him too much. Joe Blogs. Will there be Russian schools in Ukraine once this is over? Not sure how this is related. You mean what kind of Russian schools? Like official state powered Russian schools? I don't think so. I think Russia, with this invasion, it burned any kind of bridges. At this moment, any official Russian positions are like on official level. It's not even about the will. It's about the fact that there is not going to be a politician that can advocate for it. How do you see political negotiations? Okay, the war is over. Ukraine is a democracy, so a lot of voices can be heard. Like, how can you see someone saying we should get Russian language schools to be official without it triggering like most of the society in Ukraine to be against it? Eh? Hard. Will Russia withdraw from NPP as IAEA requested? Yes, with the thanks of the Ukrainian armed forces. How can we imagine Russia after this debacle? Will Putin still remain in power, or will there be a possible revolution in Moscow? I don't think there's going to be a revolution. You're putting too much effort. Again, we are putting too much hope in Russian people. Don't expect anything from Russian people. They are slaves in their minds. They cannot, like, even fucking Russian opposition cannot get shit together. And you're asking from a local Russian citizen that right now is still supporting the military action in Ukraine? Give me a break. The question is, will we see Russia after this debacle? Like, will Russia still stay, or will parts of it will get annexed essentially by the China, well, de facto annexed? I don't know. I don't know how Russia will look. To be honest, I don't really care. Once they get out of Ukraine, they can do whatever the fuck they want. Will Russia further? Yes. Oh, vodka is actually, I actually, this is about vodka. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen this. I'm going to turn this. So there's a video by a channel named Crowd. It's a very, very interesting video about, oh, I'm going to put this one. It's a video where he speaks about how vodka ruined Russia. And essentially, he talks about the history of vodka and where it came from. I really recommend you also watching that video. It's super cool. It is explaining a lot about where does the problem of Russian alcoholism come in and how it influenced Russia. I'm not maybe agreeing with all the points, but it's an interesting thing to watch nonetheless. Alcoholism is bad, yeah. Unless you're Russian, then it's just is. All right. Yes, alcoholism is as bad as they say in Russia. I would think that it's even worse. It's really terrible. It's really, really terrible. But to be honest, it's, I mean, it's there is more things to just being alcoholism in Russia. I think it comes to the fact that they just don't want to get their shit together, like, for the future. Like, they don't have this, like, a lot of the videos, for example, from inside Russia, when you watch some kind of local bloggers, because there are sometimes local bloggers in Russia that live in different cities in Russia, and some of them are even interviewing local Russian populace. And you know, they're walking down these shitty streets that are like falling apart. They have like trash everywhere, like dogs running around, you know, like wolves howling essentially. Like, you can imagine the picture, like, you know, like all the how Russia is looking terrible. And then bloggers come out, hey, how's it going for you? Do you think it's okay? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Can you survive? It's like, yeah, barely. I'm getting some money, but like, that's it. Russians are very detached. Like, this is something that the Russian state has done really well. They built this perspective about the fact that Russian state doesn't care about you, so you don't have to care about the Russian state. And then they changed the narrative and they said, like, okay, now you need to listen to what the Russian state does. So, but they still don't care about their surroundings. And now Russian population are these essentially worms that are brought to this position where they're living inside of shitty apartments, inside of a shitty cities, inside of a shitty country, where they don't really even know if they want something better, and they cannot even comprehend what better is. That's why when they're seeing in Ukrainian apartments toilets that are literal actual toilets, how we see them, instead of a hole in the ground in the yard, they are acting all surprised and like, how is this happening? How is this possible? That's the level we're looking at. Like, I think one of the biggest, how do you say, experiences Russian forces gained from going to Ukraine is to see how much better they can live. I'm not sure if this is going to bring any kind of change, but it's definitely telling when they're taking all of the toilets and washing machines with them. I saw a Russian give the middle finger up to Ukrainian protesting in Europe in front of a Russian embassy. The Russian was on vacation in Europe and couldn't be bothered about Ukrainian children dying. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I really don't like as a narrative. This is just Putin's war and so on and so on. Oh my God, I think something is running. You might see an ad right now. I hope you can close it. I accidentally pressed the button for ad. I'm sorry. Yes. What percentage of Russian economy is based on Pornhub videos? I don't know. It's a very good question. Just got an ad. Yeah, sorry. I just pressed the button. Like I wanted to check like what's the number. Never mind. Anyway, just close it. Skip it. Pornhub videos. I think now it's mostly OnlyFans. No, I thought OnlyFans overtook Pornhub. Not sure. But we know that Pornhub and OnlyFans stopped paying to Russian. What, didn't they? I think they stopped paying to the accounts in Russia. So I guess not that many anymore. Not that much anymore. Our society is broken. Yes. Massimo is asking, there is something that I've always wondered since 2014. How is Russia still alive even after all the economic sanctions it has gotten? Mostly the money that it has and the low demand from the population. Like the population is having a very, very low demand from the government. So a lot of the funds can be cut to support the socials from the populace. And secondly, Russia did save a lot of oil money that European Union paid over the years. Russia right now is surviving because over the last 20, 30 years, European Union has been providing it with super profits. The money that we paid in tax over the years before is now making Russia go into Ukraine and kill people. I need us to understand this. We in Europe are really like, we need to get it. We need to get it that we paid for this. It is our fault as much as the Russians themselves. And we need to make amends to this. That's why support Ukraine. Send money to Ukraine. You want to donate to Ukraine? Send money to Ukraine directly. All I know, it's like, yes, Russia doesn't teach Ukrainian language. Well, yeah, I mean, like the language issue, I don't understand at all. Ukraine is a unitary country with single state language. There is no reason to state that. An important part here is that we must understand that maybe it's not as true for Ukraine, but if we take someone like, and I reference Baltics a lot because they are a very similar situation, a lot of the Russian-speaking population in the Baltics as well. And I think and the way that they changed after the Soviet Union collapsed was very much telling of how a country can become more European rather than having in this flux state. Maybe after the Second World War, and like generally we could compare, like Ukraine to Poland just because they're like similar in size and populations. But I think if we're talking about the post-Soviet collapse, because Poland technically wasn't part of the Soviet Union, they were part of the Warsaw Pact, whereas the Baltics were part of the Soviet Union proper. And Ukraine, by being in this state of flux in between, having this dealing with oligarchs, indecisive between do we want to deal with Russia or we want to deal with EU, whereas the Baltics said like, no, fuck the Russians, let's just go to the EU, are now so much better countries and are pretty much almost to the European average levels of prosperity. So this is the place where Ukraine can be. And we need to understand that once the country and the language within the country, the main one, becomes more dominant and the country becomes more rich, a lot of the companies will start running in the native language that is derived by the country itself, which the accounting should be done, in which the business is done, in which the conversation should be done with the outside world. Knowing the country's main language gives more possibilities to the people who know it. So when a child goes to school and it's a, for example, Russian school, and they might not teach Ukrainian language at all, that child will have less possibilities in life after he finishes school than a person that went to Ukrainian school, especially now that the Russian language is very closely associated with a lot of aggressive expansion from their neighbor. So we need to understand, by keeping the Russian language schools, we are subjugating a huge layer of population, the children that will come to in the next generations. Ukraine will be subjugating them to have less opportunity than otherwise. That is an important thing in my perspective to understand. Ryan Macbeth, I'm gonna take him now. I'm gonna look it up. Wasn't he announced on the Jake Bros channel that he's gonna be joining him? Also, Jake Bros channel, I recommend you so much. I mean, like, I'm recommending all of this. I'm a guy with barely any subscribers. I'm like a niche YouTuber, like what is not even a major blip, but a minor blip. So, and Jake gets like 500,000 views on his videos. You all know them by a long shot. But I don't care. I'm gonna do this until the war ends, and then we can have another of these sessions where we're gonna talk about what we're gonna do with the channel after the war is over. I have plans for what to do after the war. By the way, something you can guys tell me. Do you have any plans to do when the war is over? What do you plan? I'm gonna read some of the questions and comments you wrote right after and now something before. Yeah, I read everything that Putin put out. I read he is like totally Hitler, like completely like Russia is a fascist state. Whoever denies this, like a lot of our in the West are putting a lot of aesthetics towards fascism and Nazism. Like, so they're seeing like a symbols and whatever, whereas in Russia they're actually following fascist more in as an ideology rather than the maybe, well, now with the Z's and V's it's also symbols, but they build their own essential symbols, whereas a lot of the Nazism was previously associated with like the Third Reich symbols. Visit Ukraine, very good. John, do you have any, if you guys want to visit Ukraine, have you thought about visit Ukraine where? Like I can maybe give you some hints as a like what needs to see. Obviously, we're all gonna have. We all should have a party in Crimea. I think Crimean beach party would be really nice at some point. Yeah. Wouldn't compare Putin. Well, okay. So why the comparison to Hitler? It's not about personality to personality. It's just that Putin's argument for this war is fascist in nature. It's like blood and soil arguments. It's about we are one people, except Ukraine is a shittier version of our own people, and I am the king of these peoples, and I know the better ways for us. That's in that sense, right? Obviously, it's not the same. You know, like you can put the dictators on a chart, and they will be overlapping a lot of what they're saying. It's just it's very ironical that Russia is stating that they're fighting Nazis, whereas they're actual fascist regime. Because, like, if you remember what fasci is from, so fasci comes from the Italian word that means like a bunch of twigs tied together. So essentially, we need to join up around our leader, like, you know, our strong leader. Like when we're together, we're a strong nation. So that's the definitions of fascism, at least that I know of, and it's even symbolized with this. Like an axe that is built of like many twigs that are tied together. So it's maybe if there's an Italian in the chat, they can explain a little bit better. I'm not that familiar with Italian language, but the point is that fascism is pretty much what Russia is doing. It's this, like, we have a strong leader, we need to support our strong leader in whatever he wants. And yeah, buying a beer for Starsky. Yeah, I mean, like, Starsky said that he wants to travel Europe, so when he stops in Denmark, I'm gonna definitely catch up with him. Hi Jimmy, welcome to the Brothers in Arms. Nice to have you here. My ancestors were Cossacks from Zaporizhia and fought with Swedish king in Poltava. After they lost their they immigrated to Sweden early 1700s. I want to visit that part of Ukraine. Ooh, Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia, I wonder if it's not going to become like this big center of the southern Ukraine, because like the Zaporizhia, Kryvyi Rih, this region has been a big stronghold for essentially. I know that Russians never made it to Zaporizhia, but it's a big regional center, and I know Dnipro was also kind of big in that region. So that's a definitely interesting things to visit, especially Kryvyi Rih. Like Kryvyi Rih, they have very interesting things to see there. It's a it's a city that is like, it's a very long one. It's along the main railroad lines and track lines. And it's an industrial city. There's been images, like, also because of all of the quarries that they have in the area, that the air sometimes is even red because of this. Like to visit a monument for the liquidators to Chernobyl disaster. Ooh, that is very cool. I mean, Chernobyl area is very nice. There was a lot of tourist attraction going to Chernobyl. Not anymore, I don't know. Like, I'm afraid that that area can be mined for a while. Oh, Fabi Notturno is Italian. He can confirm that they called Fasci da Combattimento and Squadrace were based in the concept of a strong and prevarication, the strongman, in the concept of a strongman. Yes, thank you so much. I know now that I had a little bit. The Enforcer, yes, I need to add the Enforcer. I've discovered him recently. I think his concept is very cool. I love it so much. All right, guys, we're slowly getting close to 2 hours. So last 5 minutes, anything you want to add, talk about, let's do a last call, and we're slowly gonna wrap this up for the Sunday. Hope tomorrow I will release either tomorrow or after tomorrow, I will release the Why the Russian Army is Shit video. It's gonna be great, really amazing. And if not, then oh no, I mean, like, that's gonna be either Monday or Tuesday. And then an update will also come in the coming days, probably tomorrow. I hope that's going to be great. Thank you so much for. I've understood that you're in decay. Where can we have a fist bump? I should call probably for a Copenhagen meetup. I mean, Copenhagen, maybe, I don't know. Maybe Vejle. I think Vejle would be central. Like, then people from Copenhagen can come, and if someone lives in Jylland, they also can come, and then we can maybe have a meetup around Vejle. I think that would be more or less central for, like, if we consider where people go. Also, Vejle is pretty. I'm not sure if you visited Vejle. Visit Denmark. Denmark is cool. In 2006, I landed at Donetsk airport on my way to Mariupol. Have fun memories of Mariupol. I've never made it to Mariupol. Like, when I wanted to visit Mariupol, on my way there, a bus actually got turned around, and because I didn't have like an army pass, I couldn't make it. It was right when the shelling of Mariupol happened, the first one during the 2014 or 15, and that's when I never see the city, and now it's a destroyed city. I am very sad, very sad. I mean, I'm very sad about this whole war. It's completely unbelievable. I would love for my channel to never exist. I want to one day wake up and, like, this never happened. Like, I don't have a YouTube channel, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just that the war would never happen, and I would never have to talk about this. It's terrible. Perfect. Yeah. Watch me, watch other guys. Remember, just guys, the more you watch, the more you support YouTube that is supporting Ukraine. The more information you have, the more arguments that you have. Like whenever someone is speaking nonsense anywhere on the internet, fight the fucking trolls. We must not. We need to understand that by this point the war is hot. There is no, how do you say, like neutral side where we should decide, oh, maybe, you know, there's negotiations to be had. No. Like Russia is the evil. They are committing war crimes. They are completely in the wrong. There is nothing good about it. The only right action for Russia to do is to get out of Ukraine and then talk how they can make amends. That is the only course of action that would be acceptable for the Russians to do. Anything else, all of these negotiations, talks, whatever other nonsense anyone is spouting, is complete garbage. Russia gets out, then we talk. And the talk should be about, well, how would they pay for the destruction and the loss of lives to Ukrainians? That's the only way it goes forward. No other way possible. So everything else is just nonsense that is spouted by trolls. They want to get inside of your head. They want to try to make you doubt that, like, oh, does this means, like, you know, it's like, oh, like someone is like, you know, especially it's like whenever the Nazis was like, oh, but you know, like Ukrainians are also like shooting. Oh, here's a video where like Ukrainian is like mistreating some of the Russian prisoners of war. Like, you know, he's like troubling him brutally, or like his nose is broken because like Ukrainian hit him. It's like bullshit. Stop killing people, get out of Ukraine, and then no one's nose will be broken. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you so much for everyone that donated. I will post a report once I get the money sent over to me, and then I will buy something and I will definitely update you. See my videos. Love you so much. Take care. Slava Ukraini.